Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today we are on day 4 of the Sage Satchel Sew Along. So, before we get started, I want to go ahead and pull out the flap that we will be working on first. I went ahead and attached my magnetic snap before we got started. I used my paper pattern piece to mark the placement. Just a quick reminder, because I messed up, do not try to attach it to your exterior. The magnetic snap goes on the interior of the flap. Of course, common sense will tell you that, but I messed up, so it's okay though. I think it's alright. But anyway, use your paper pattern piece to attach your magnetic snap. This is the male portion, and it will fit right on top of your front pocket. So we will set the flap aside, and we're going to start working on our decorative straps here. So the way I'm going to do mine, as I mentioned before, my vinyl is stretchy. I need to be very careful with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time and I'm going to go very slow. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay these wrong sides together, and then I'm going to stitch down both sides, both of the long sides, at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, this is going to fix these two together. I'm going to do this really slow. I'm not going to rush this at all. I'll speed it up for the video, but in actuality, it's going to be going very slow. I am lengthening my stitch length here just to help me. So I'm going to flip it over and do it that way to help prevent any curling of this. So now that I have stitched a 1/4 inch down each long edge, I'm going to go ahead and attach, I'm using a rectangular ring there at the bottom, and turn it under about, I think at 3/4 of an inch to an inch. Just turn it under a little bit there. And now the pattern tells you to go ahead and do your 1/8 of an inch and a 1/4 inch, but I am going to use my 1/8 of an inch stitch to actually attach it on here. The pattern says you can use rivets. I may add rivets, but I want to go ahead and do this for extra security for me. I just feel more comfortable. So we are going to go 2 inches in from this raw edge here. If you don't feel comfortable eyeballing this, you can, mark a line or use double-sided tape. I'm okay doing it this way. This bag is just for me, so I'm a little more relaxed when it's just a bag I'm using and not like an order for someone. So I'm going to go ahead and place this on here and then just slowly stitch down. I'm going to keep my stitch length at about 3.5. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same thing for the other side, and then with your 2 remaining strips, again, you put them wrong sides together. The way I'll do mine is I'll stitch a 1/4 inch from each long edge, and then I'll use the 1/8 of an inch to attach it to my bag. I will take the remaining rectangular ring I have and just put it up about 1 inch to a 3/4 of an inch up high, and then stitch that down. So the last thing we need to do with the flap is to sew it right sides together, the exterior and the lining. So what I'm going to do is I just have my pieces clipped around the edges. I'm not going to sew this top straight piece. This edge will stay unsewn because we will turn the flap right sides out through that opening. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to use a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew all along the bottom and the sides and up here. After I get that sewn together, I'm going to trim that seam allowance, and then I'm going to top stitch the flap after I turn it right sides out, and it'll be completed, and I'll set it aside until we're going to attach it to the bag. One thing before I start sewing is I want to mention you have your hardware here at the bottom. from your decorative straps on the flap. The pattern tells us that we can tape those up, or you can clip them, or whatever you want to do. If you're using a raw edge material you do not want to pin though, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go slow and I'm going to feel them and push them up with my hand whenever I get to that point to make sure that I don't catch them in the seam allowance. But definitely do whatever you're comfortable with. Just sew right sides together, exterior lining, 1/2 inch seam allowance, trim, turn, top stitch. Okay, my flap is complete. I'm going to now set that aside, and we have one last step we're going to be working on for day 4. So the last task we're going to do today on day 4 is the key minder. This is an optional component to the bag. In the pattern, you are given the measurements for the key minder piece. I'm going to do mine a little differently. But first I'm going to explain how you would do it if you followed the pattern directions exactly. With the piece, if you are looking at it face up, you would take the raw edges, the long raw edges, and fold them right sides together. You would sew along the wrong edges. That would make a tube. Then you would turn that tube inside out. That's a great way to do this, but I don't have the tool that you use to turn the tube inside out, and while I could do it by hand, I just didn't feel the need to do that. And so what I simply did was made a piece, folded the piece as double fold bias tape, and stitched along both edges that way. Regardless of if you make the tube method in the pattern or if you fold it as a double fold piece of bias tape, you have to make sure your measurements are correct for your hardware. I chose a piece of a swivel hook that is 1/2 inch. So therefore, my measurements had to be 2 inches in width, so when I folded it together, it would fit my hardware. So make sure you follow the measurements that way. Another option, what I did in a previous bag, is I just used a piece of 1-inch webbing. I cut the webbing to the length specified in the pattern, and then I just attached my 1-inch swivel hook at the end. Regardless of the method you use, you need to make for sure that you fold in your raw edges, so whenever you attach your swivel hook, there's not going to be any fraying here at the end. If you have any questions about the methods or anything like that, please let me know, but I assume that most people probably will either do the tube method, fold it like a piece of double fold bias tape, or use webbing, and should be okay with that. Once you have your swivel hook attached, you're going to attach it to your bag. Now in the pattern, she has it attached on the exterior part of the bag, but in my first bag and in this one, I'm going to attach this to the interior of the bag. So I'm just going to pull out my interior just like this, and I'm just going to attach it to this side. And I'm just going to attach it to this side where the zippers close. That's just a preference. It doesn't matter at all. And I am just going to put it right in there and just baste it in place. So I just basted that quickly in place. It'll get attached better at the end of the, whenever we're putting all the bag together. Okay, for the last step and on day 4, I want to talk to you about the D-rings. Now I'm choosing to use the raw edge D-ring, and the template she has is in one of the pattern pieces. You can also use the fabric if you want. Now in the video, in the pattern, she talks about interfacing this with a ribbon, which I don't have, so I just put a piece of Decaville Light on the back of mine, and I folded over the raw edge and put my D-ring strap on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I attached my other D-ring to my gusset after I've already sewed on my gusset. That can be done, but it is very difficult. The pattern recommends, and I suggest you follow the pattern and don't be like me and mess up. Attach your D-ring to your gusset if you're using these raw edge pieces before you sew your gusset on. So tomorrow in day 5, I'm going to start the video by talking about attaching the gusset and to the bag front and back. My D-rings will not be attached in that portion because I didn't do it right. So let me show you with what I have now how this is going to look so you don't make that mistake that I did. So the D-ring is going to be attached to your gusset. You can see I've already attached one. Let me make sure you can see. I'll hold the bag down this way so you make sure you can see. You need to have, before you have your bag looking like mine with your gusset attached to your front and your back, you need to have your D-ring on. So what you do, if you're using the fabric, you're just going to line it up with the raw edge and it's not a big deal. But if you, if you're using fabric, you will just attach it right here and baste it in. But if you're using this, it is very difficult to attach it down here once the bag has the gusset attached. It is possible, but it's just not worth it. So use your pattern piece. It shows you, you can put your pattern piece and just line it up right here with this edge and it'll show you where to attach your D-ring. Attach your D-ring before you sew your gusset on your front and back of the body and you'll just have such an easier time. The way you can do it is you can just sew around the entire perimeter. You can add rivets, you can do whatever you want, but I just want to make this note. Yours will look different than mine tomorrow, and that was just a mistake on mine. So I will edit out the part of my video where I'm attaching the D-ring, and you just have this portion. Just know yours will be a little different than mine. Sorry about that, and we all make mistakes, and we'll continue on. But in the end, you know, you'll have your D-ring attached like me. It's just yours will be much easier going along. Okay, and we'll start tomorrow with attaching the gusset, but your D-ring will already be on there.